And now, God, open my mouth so that I can speak. Open our ears so that we can hear. And open our hearts so that we can change. By your power and through your grace. Amen. Please be seated. It may sound silly to say, but I've been thinking a lot about Jesus lately. I suppose that makes a bit of sense, and after all, we are nearing the end of our reflections on what the Epiphany means, what it really means for us to have Jesus alive and present among us, to have God visibly manifest in the world we live in. Today we're told that Jesus came down from the mountain where he'd been praying to a level place where he puts himself right there in the midst of all manner of people who've come to him seeking release from whatever holds them back. He's not above them, looking down on them. He's with them. And Luke is also careful to tell us that all who came to him were healed. He withheld nothing. When Jesus begins to teach, he flips the script from what many of us think we understand about being blessed by offering the Beatitudes, a not so new but rarely understood declaration of God's blessing. But why? What's he after? Is it possible that Jesus is trying to get us to take a look at our connectedness to him, to God, and to each other, so that we might find a more expansive understanding of what it means for all of us to be his disciples? You see, Luke takes the time to tell us that the apostles were there, but so also were a great crowd of his disciples. I began to think about that word disciple, what it means in theory, and what being a disciple of Jesus means for us literally. Now, I couldn't help myself, so I asked my little handheld computer what it meant to be a disciple. And here's what I got back. A disciple means a dedicated follower of a teacher, actively imitating their life and teachings, essentially becoming a living example of the person they're learning from. The AI wizard in my phone then broke things down further to some key points about discipleship. The first of these is active learning. It's not just about passively listening, but actively studying and incorporating the teachings into daily life. Next up is imitation. The disciple strives to live like their teacher, mirroring their actions and character. Now, to me, this is a bit shallow because I believe true discipleship requires more than being able to mimic the acts of another, but actually understanding and embracing what motivates the actions. Then comes a commitment to spreading the message. A true disciple will actively share the teachings of their teacher with others. And finally, personal relationship. Being a disciple implies a deep personal connection and a commitment to the teacher. How are we connected to Jesus? And what does it mean for us to be disciples of someone who put everything, including his life, on the line to show us a different way? What is the call to us today? It's not really any different than it was for the people around Jesus that day, though the stakes are higher for us because we know more than those people did that day. We know what he will go on to do, how much he will sacrifice, and that the world will be forever changed because he walked among us. Think about all of the times we've renewed our baptismal covenant together in this space, including those vows to seek and serve Christ in all people, to strive for justice and peace among all people, and to respect the dignity of every human being. Those vows were crafted as a roadmap for us to follow in our collective and individual journeys of discipleship. Jesus is calling us to see our connectedness as one human family. He wants us to see with the eyes of our hearts that God's favor is available for all people. Expanding on the words he read in the Isaiah scroll in the synagogue that day, he's offering hope to the poor, the hungry, and the oppressed by reminding them and us of God's relentless promise to show up, especially for those that society seems to have no use for. He also cautions those of us not in those categories to be careful of getting too comfortable with all of our possessions and our positions of privilege. The words of woe he speaks are not actually part of some threat or curse, but actually a warning about the danger of trusting only in ourselves and convincing ourselves that our position and privilege is a sign that we've already done all we need to do to take our place in the heavenly country. He's clarifying his mission and inviting us to join him by reminding us that it is the responsibility of those with the positions of power and privilege to stand up for and with those who do not have it. By reminding us that we do not define who is and isn't blessed by our human standards, and that God is at work through all of us. That when we rely only on ourselves or use our power and privilege only for our own benefit, we will find ourselves walking a path of woe, and he is calling us to actively choose a different path. What Jesus is doing here is asking us to turn our hearts towards God and walk a path of love. Love for God and love for one another. He compels us to love because the love of God that flows to us and through us can transform anything and anyone. I believe part of what being a disciple looks like is sharing what we have, not merely in charity, but in community. It looks like being compassionate and reaching out when we see someone struggling and not turning away from what makes us uncomfortable. It looks like listening, really listening to the stories of people who have lived a different reality than our own and letting their stories change how we see the world. Just as Jesus did on that level plane, it looks like risking our own comfort and security to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity with those who struggle to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. Especially those whose lived experience has been invalidated because of the color of their skin, their gender identity, who they love, where they come from or how they got here, or what language they speak or don't speak, as the case may be. People say a lot that the church should stay out of politics. But what about disciples? Are we sometimes citizens and sometimes disciples? It would seem to me that we should be both at the same time, all the time. I saw a post yesterday from theologian and Pastor Ben Kremer. It was actually something he'd posted a long time ago that he shared again. He wrote, "Beware of any Christian movement that acts as though the world is full of enemies to be destroyed rather than full of neighbors to be loved. Beware of any Christian movement that demands the government be an instrument of God's wrath, but never a source of God's mercy, generosity, or compassion." There's a lot of heartbreak and hurt in the world today, and in particular in our nation, that needs healing. I cannot stand here in the midst of you and pretend like I'm not concerned about some of the dark corners we seem to be turning around. Yet it's not lost on me. And I pray that it's not lost on all of you that St. Stephen's occupies a unique place as an overtly open and affirming faith community for all people in our city as we strive for justice and peace among all people. We have the opportunity, all of us in this room, to be a blessing to the world we live in by going all in and modeling the unconditional, self-giving love of Jesus Christ to all people. That is the covenant we make with those baptismal vows. My prayer is that we will live into that covenant and be like that tree that Jeremiah speaks of, planted by the water, able to withstand the heat, laden with fruit, and always green, sending out its roots by the stream to receive the life-giving blessing of God. I pray even more that we will seek new ways to be the stream that others reach out for. I pray that we will be a great crowd of true disciples and let God work through us and this place by giving ourselves in service to others, by using all that we have been given to be a source of hope and life so that others may thrive too, trusting all the while that God is with all of us. So later on, when you come to the table, and then every time you come to the table after that, I invite you to turn to the one who is the source of our strength and the one who is our comfort in struggle. Put your trust in God and remember that as Jesus' disciples, we are called to be a blessing to others in a never-ending cycle of love. Remember that you are loved and that you were created to love, and then go out from here and share it, withholding nothing from anyone. Full stop.